I mean, I think that what I do in terms of process-oriented family therapy is pretty similar um, in some ways, whatever the condition, the presenting problem is, because what we're really working with is what is the emerging, evolving growth of the system. That whatever that symptom is calling attention to. And so if a child, for example, is depressed, that we might just find out what is causing the depression in a more causal way. But then we're also working on a more dreaming level with how is the whole system somehow depressed. And also, in terms of what's under that depression, at the essence of that depression, what is right in some way about or meaningful about that direction. So let me give you an example. I'm thinking of a family with a young woman who was very depressed, very severely depressed. And what was meaningful about that was that she was showing the family how to be more feeling. The mother had had so much trauma that she decided it was better to just give up all emotions. Mm-hmm. And so the daughter was suddenly carrying all the emotions. And since the daughter's depression was so disturbing to the family, it constantly kept feeling issues in the face of the family. Right?
Right.
So what I would do then is have, in that case, what happened was that when the mom understood that and began having her own feelings, then the daughter's depression was lifted. And not only that, but then the daughter and the mother connected deeply, which was part of what was feeding the daughter's depression. So that's what I would say, that we work with things as meaningful disturbances to awakening the whole family.
So if the disturbance was something like a parent who was unable to respond to their child, for example, which is not an uncommon thing to see in a child and family kind of health system, for example, a parent who is sort of cut off or somehow disturbed by their inner state and unable then to see the child or respond to the child, would you be working with that disturbance?
In process family therapy, we work at all levels. So at one level, you're just trying to fix things, right? So on that level, we might try to fix things and try to give the parents some better skills. We might also, we work on all levels in family work, on the individual level, on the relationship level, on the internal level, on the family level, and on the whole societal level. So we might give that parent some attention and help them try to become more present. That's a more ordinary way of working. But in a more essence way of working, there is something meaningful about that energy, not only for that family, for the collective. In other words, one of the problems universally is especially young parents say, I give up paying any attention to myself. Mm-hmm. So here you have a parent who is paying tons of attention to themselves. Yeah. So that is something that, for example, I might say to a whole family, and possibly, like what often happens is the parents aren't paying any attention to the kids, and the kids are focusing on and parenting the parents, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But in a system like that, having everybody pick that up, and including the young people, saying maybe you should be more focused on yourself. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, that's a role that the parent occupies, while the child occupies more the role of focusing on the parent. So if we got everybody to focus on themselves, that would change that system. And then at least the young person would focus on themselves, and hopefully that would break that polarization, and the parent would also get out of that role and begin focusing on the child. So,
So you're saying that the disturbance, which is the parents focusing on themselves, you pick it up for the whole system and help everyone to go in that with more awareness, basically.
Yeah. I mean, in earth-based process work these days, what we talk a lot about is the disturbing energy. We give it a name, like we call it the X energy. Mm-hmm. and the part that it disturbs is the U energy. And so one way to look at that is that this family has two energies. An X energy that's neglectful, that disturbs the U energy that needs attention.
Yeah.
And somehow we've got to get things more fluid in that system. It's all polarized and stuck.
Yes.
So we're going to facilitate between those on an energetic level. And there's many ways to do that. We might have them change roles. For example, if let's say the kids were old enough to do this, we might have the kids play the neglectful ones and the parents play the needy ones.
Mm-hmm.
We might do it as role play. Or we might ask each person to focus and work on those two parts of themselves, the one that needs to focus on themselves and the one that needs to be present for others. So we're taking it not just as a pathology, but as a potential creative space to work with.
That's great. I sort of, you've covered like the earth-based, some stuff about the earth-based. I wonder if you could just say a tiny bit more about what the earth-based approach that you refer to is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, process-oriented psychology developed another wing. It has many, many wings. And another wing in the last years has been this earth-based work, which is to use basically the idea that the earth itself contains a lot of wisdom, and it contains a facilitative mind, meaning that the earth accepts all parts. In other words, you don't hear the beach and an ocean conflicting with the rocks, saying you're not supposed to be a rock. And so the earth itself models a kind of wholeness. And so what we're saying is that by utilizing the wisdom of the earth and that wholeness, we can change our perspective on families and on problems so that we're not just against the problem. We see the problem as one energy and the part that it impacts another. So that gives us the detachment to work on a system. You know, imagine that, you know, I'm so against what, I can't stand what the father's doing in this system. So I have no detachment. But if I just see the father as a crashing wave against a soft beach, that gives me the detachment to think about how to work with that and the involvement of both of them. So we use the earth for its wisdom and especially its ability to give us detachment, because probably the biggest problem in most couples and family therapy for therapists is that they buy the storyline, and in the story there's always a hero, usually a good person, and a bad person. Mm-hmm. And once you buy that storyline, you've lost your ability to facilitate, which means you can actually not only not help a family, but you can harm them by locking them in their polarities.
So it sounds like you're talking about a slight shift of attitude towards seeing the nature of the whole situation rather than just seeing the good and the bad or one side of the situation.
Yeah, and it's a huge change because most family therapy took the bad, said, well, it's not a bad kid, for example, it's a sick family. And we're stepping back another step, and we're saying we don't see it as a sick family. We see it as a family that new development and wisdom is trying to happen in disturbing fashions. And how can we facilitate that evolvement and make it easier?
Thanks. I wonder, one final thing really to ask you, when I hear these, when you talk about these skills and that you're using in facilitating these situations, how accessible do you think these can be for a professional who works with child and families who maybe hasn't come across process work before? Do you think
well, you know, I thought these were very difficult skills to transfer when I first learned them. But then I had this experience about a year ago. I was at the International Conference on Trauma in California, and I decided to try to present these skills and see if people who had never had any introduction to process work could use them. So I gave them all these earth-based exercises to try on their own lives, and I had afterwards about 15 people line up to tell me how they had used the exercises successfully and made these huge breakthroughs in their own traumatic aspects of life. So I began to think that actually And there's ways to do earth-based work or process work at all levels. For example, maybe I can't get somebody into the concept of the earth, but I can tell a family, where are you most comfortable in the house? What room? And let's say they say, well, around the TV, we can really relax. I can say, well, let's imagine now we're in a very tense moment that you're in your living room and everybody's really relaxed. And let's use that sense of relaxation to address all the problems that we're talking about. So anybody can do that, or almost anybody I can say, where's your favorite spot in nature? Okay? Why don't you imagine you're at that spot, go there, and notice how that affects you and how your breath changes and how it relaxes you. And now that you're there, are you there? Great, okay. Now that we're all there as a family, now let's talk about the fact that Johnny won't go to school. So you don't have to do this in terribly complicated, sophisticated ways. And I do think also that we have some pretty good methods for teaching therapists fairly rapidly how to use these methods. Mastering them and being able to use every aspect of that, like any art that you learn, takes many, many years. But I think you can get immediate applications.
It's exciting hearing you talking about that, actually. Really interesting.
Yeah.
I like
and if these tools are really that powerful, even using a little bit can be a big change.
Great, Gary. Well, I really look forward to your coming in the summer, and thanks for everything you're doing.
Thank you. I look forward to meeting all the new people and seeing old friends where we can go further with this. Can I mention one last thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
That is the other really unique thing about process-oriented family therapy is this model of community-based healing. Okay. And so what we do there is that we say that, and it's interesting, I was just reading in the Networker magazine, all kinds of attempts now realizing that one-on-one family therapy has its limits. And in community-based, what we do is that the whole seminar helps the person or the family working in the middle. It's not only the therapist, but the whole community that heals. And I think that's very important for working in social service systems, is to start thinking about how a whole community has to be there to help a family heal.